I was late. I missed my plane. Well, I didn't miss my plane. My passport was I left in somebody left in a one of those carry things in the push carts, and I couldn't. So I was on a later flight. So I got to the hall, and the matches were on. I said, "I'll run outside." So they had the noodle stands outside, like Japan. So I was starving. I've been in the plane, both airports and planes all day. So I'll just run outside and get something to eat from one of these noodle stands. I mean, imagine if, Oriental people, I went outside and I saw the rats. How big, the rats were like. They're like that, and then they're bigger than the cats. They're running. I said, well, I gotta wait till I get to the hotel.
We had I'll tell you this, and then I'll kick off. Do you know what? That's probably like some of the best podcast stuff we've never recorded. I wish I'd recorded all that as well. There's a takeaway down the road from me, and it had a food hygiene rating that you have to legally have displayed in your window of 0 or 1. It's one or the other out of 5. And it emerged shortly beforehand that you know those kebabs, not the skewer kebabs, but the giant tubes of meat that go in a circle. A video circulated of a rat on top of it running like a hamster wheel while it was. The sold quite soon afterwards.
From Sunset Beach, Hawaii, weighing 267 pounds, the magnificent Muraco.
Why is it they call him magnificent?
The man who lifts condominiums off his chest.
Anything that's explosive, anything that's exciting, Prince of Darkness, Master of Destruction, perpetrator of violence. Get ready! I'm gonna burn this place down!
So, from Rat Stories in Singapore and to my local Chippy, I will go through straight into the intro. Hello, thank you very much. My name's James. For joining us, I will do the plugs very quickly. Instagram, YouTube, podcast, dontherockmorocco.com for your signed merchandise. And I'm going to start plugging my stuff as well. 2 books. Owen, Hart and The Rock, search them on Amazon. We are going to go straight through into episode, or part 2, as it were, of the Florida special that we're doing, a 2-part special on the Florida territory. And from this point on, we're going to move to 1977 to 1981 when Don left. He had a few different spells in that era, and we are going to go straight onto it. So, Don, are you ready? Ready. Right, so the first thing I'm going to ask you is Hiro Matsuda, a name synonymous with training people's legs to break. And how was he as a trainer after the legs healed? And what was sort of if you were going to be accepted into training for Florida, how would it generally go?
Well, they put the guys, through the motions. They had them all. They had Jack, they had Matsuda. And Mike Gray, all the guys, wrestlers, Brian Blair at the time. Matsuda had he was making wrestling gear, wrestling tights, shirts, stuff for the wrestling teams and stuff. And he had 4 or 5 Korean ladies who worked in the little warehouse that he had, and they were sewing. But he had a little gym on the side. Had the big mat on the floor, and then on the other side he had the some weights, some dumbbells, and a bench, and some others, where you would go and work out sometimes. I don't know if that was the time where he broke Hulk's whole. I was working there with Brian Blair. He and I were working out. I don't know if it's the same day that he broke Hulk's ankle, or Hulk was asking him about the ankle. He says, "How you broke my ankle?" He says, "Well, how did I show you?" He said, and I remember Hiro telling Hulk, "I don't show you. I give you. I take. It's just." You have to learn what I've learned, as it went down. So he was, he was a salty old guy from old school in Japan.
Is it fair to say he had a bit of a mean streak in him, or is that just the way he was brought up to bring wrestling?
Yeah, it was just, samurai.
Yeah,
that was his Fuji. They all got all those guys got, they always got that killer instinct in them.
Was this sort of like an edict from Eddie Graham? Because he was like the same as Bill Watts and the same as a couple of other people who only wanted tough guys and the really dedicated guys. Would he be the one to say, anyone new comes in, just murder him?
I don't know. You mean guys starting or guys in the business already?
Guy starting, guy chancing their arm at trying to be a wrestler. Like maybe fans before the matches
Yeah,
who would
yeah.
take on Bob Roop, maybe.
Yeah, they probably went through a kind of a screening process and had somebody that somebody that presented them to Eddie or somebody in the office to go on into the training and stuff. So they wanted to make sure that whoever they're bringing into the business was going to be productive or be a good representative. But then again, he had Bobby Shane and some other guys doing the gay men parts and stuff like that. So it wasn't it's business is business. So but you breaking in your young guys is another story.
How much did Hiro Matsuda charge?
I don't know.
Ah,
I don't know. That was long before my time. That was he was training guys. There was they had a whole hooey there. Harley was even in. They'd take him down to the Sportatorium in Tampa, and then they'd have him because they had the ring in the back there, in back of where they do the interviews, and they did the weekly TV on Wednesdays, and they'd take him in back there, and they had Hero that Matt at Heroes. So I said, I don't know if he broke. That's when Brian and I were working out. If that's when he broke Hulk's ankle, or was it sometime earlier than that Hulk had shown up. See what they did with Hulk. And one of the big mistake is you got a guy 6'6", 300 pounds, and doesn't know, and he's a musician, bass player, but he's an athlete. He's not a, he's not a punk or anything. He wants to get in wrestling. Thinks he'd be. So what they do. They take him and they beat him down. They did the same thing with my son. It wasn't there, but they beat him down. But eventually, if you're any type of an athlete, you got any kind of brain at all, you start to learn. You get the, what you grabbed last time. I'm not going to give you this time, and everything else. And pretty soon, you've created yourself a 6'6", 300-pound monster. A guy that can take not that somebody's going to go out there and stretch Jack Briscoe or something like that. But he certainly can take somebody that, is big and bad and good looking and everything else. And not only that, he can take care of himself too. So, they kind of made a mistake in that aspect that if somebody's going to turn on him, it better be somebody good, That's why allegedly Harley brought the gun. It wasn't to Kansas City, and rather than that straight left he used to throw. So.
Were there any? I'll come back to Hulk Hogan in a second, but were there any other stars made through that brutal style of bringing people into the business?
Oh boy, all those guys that came in Florida. I don't know who was. Well, Dick Slater. When we talked about Slater earlier, Slater was one. Mike Graham, Steve Kern. Basically, anybody who was down there. They had a guy, Jim Shields, an Oklahoma wrestler that came there. He was doing a lot of training. Remember, he'd do a thing where he wouldn't even use his hands, and just with his legs, he wouldn't let the guy off his mat. And different guys, they'd have a lot of amateur wrestlers and stuff coming through. I can't remember offhand if you named some guys that I know. Brian Blair got trained there, came up that way, but he was an amateur wrestler and a college football player at the University of Louisville. So it wasn't like he was, and he spent he grew up in Tampa, so I don't know if he'd been accustomed to there, been around those guys all the time. But, and some Orndorff, Paul Orndorff is another one, came up that way. And another guy, be careful what you teach him. Doesn't make, turn around and end up biting you in the ass in the end, So what, he went back, Matsuda, and returned the favor. So, the things like, guys like that, that's Orndorff was one, so yeah.
Back to Hulk Hogan, and I know it's easy to say now that you saw championship in him, but at the time, I've seen the training footage that they filmed an actual film as well, so it's preserved very well. Very tall, already balding, sort of lanky at the time. And, you were on the road with him for maybe the first couple of months he was in the business before he was sent elsewhere. Did you see championship in him? And how's his attitude, I suppose?
Well, I was living in an apartment in North Tampa. I had up there was near Humperdinck and Stan Lane, Hollywood Blondes. It was up there, and he had a girlfriend. His girlfriend's sister was living, and then we had the big pool area, Florida, the pool area and stuff. So he was around there with Brutus Beefcake, Eddie Leslie, and he was up in. That's when he was first starting up in Pensacola for the Fullers up there, and he got his first before he'd gone to and he was a big guy then. He looked. Dusty didn't want him around. So he went some spot show out around Gainesville, around there when, it was Okeechobee or some small high school town you look at him in the ring, my God. If he turns any kind of work and, and Vince crafted it to fit his style, but yeah, Jesus, 6'6", blonde hair, built like that, he was. Yeah, his box office.
Yeah. Do you remember he was the Super Destroyer? Probably Super Destroyer number 75894, because everyone seemed to have that gimmick at one point or another. But he was the Super Destroyer for about a month or two, and then he disappeared. Do you remember anything about the Super Destroyer?
Scott Irwin? Is that Scott Irwin?
No, Hulk Hogan was Super Destroyer. That's why I was saying everyone seems to be Super Destroyer.
Oh, no. I don't remember Super Destroyer. No, I remember I was with Scott Irwin when he was Super D. He was a hell of a guy.
I'll ask one more question on Hogan, and it's not on Hogan. It's actually Ed Leslie. Memories of Ed Leslie.
Good guy. Decent worker. Didn't not noted for bump taker or a great worker, but and always kind of he was Hulk's best friend from elementary school or junior high, or from early on, in Port Tampa, from kids. And so where Hulk went, Eddie went. Disney went, and he kind of and it went on to New York and everywhere else. So he kind of got a rap for riding on Hulk's tailcoats. But in those days there were no better tailcoats to be riding on. Unless you're traveling around with Vince Jr. or somebody like that, it was the right move to make. He became a superstar in the WWF. Brutus the Barber. And he wasn't. He wasn't. I don't know if he had any big programs with Hulk or had a lot of big matches with Hulk. But he was
tagged up with him a few times, and I think he faced him at a Starrcade in maybe '94 or '95, but nothing. Well, major.
That's after WWE. Yeah. That's after. See, that's when I left in '88. I left the business pretty much in '88, and that's when things were changing. And soon after that, Nash and Scott Hall and the Click and all that stuff started, and they were all manipulating in office. I was never privy to any of that action and all the bad rap that Hogan got. I know he was working. I know he'd been working with Vince and against Vince, but for himself, just basically, protecting his brand, his which, he became with Vince. It was a partnership made in hell, like Bruno, like the thing, sooner or later, you can't have all the Pittsburgh towns. It's like, there's something like that, where they're, your money, your right guard. I want part of your right guard advertising money or your movie money or something like that. So, but Eddie was a good guy, and he got bad rap for being Hulk's friend, and
the worst people to be friends with.
Yeah, what a convenient. He had his wagon hitched to the right star. I'll tell you, because he made Jesus. From the 80s into the mid-90s, 12, 15 years. A beautiful living.
Yeah, he was even in the NWO for a short while. Probably until '98, he was cashing paychecks.
Oh, right. So it was in the early 80s he came into WWE, FE, whatever.
I am going to go back onto you. It is your show. It should be about you, but I seem to ask questions about everything but you, but this is definitely about you, is in 1979, The Magnificent M. Talk me through the entire storyline from beginning to end, who came up with it, what was the end goal, and just everything about it.
Well, I had been back to San Francisco with Roy. I got back, got my ocean fix, my surfing fix for a good better part of a year, and I turned heel on Patterson and Pat, and that was it. I didn't want to be babyface any longer. I wasn't a babyface any longer. So to carry on, it was natural to go back to that Jack Briscoe, look-alike thing with the figure four and our Broadways and all those other things to go back to Florida. And they were wondering how they wanted to bring me in under what was the storyline I was going to carry coming in. And my understanding, maybe Jerry Briscoe, may have been Jack, may have been somebody else. But my understanding, it came from Buddy Rogers and Eddie Graham, came all the way from the top, Magnificent M. That I'd been, after the 77 run, with the Koloff and Saito and all the, the great heels that had been in there, I'd been established pretty well I was over pretty well as a babyface. And pretty well respected babyface. And well known, and so what were they going to do? Why was they going to go? Is it let's go with the idea that you're sick of, you're sick of being compared to Jack Briscoe. I'm better than Jack Briscoe, and better looking. Obviously, I got more hair, and all that, whatever. But there was that. But it was how I was going to enter the territory. How I was going to make my comeback. So evidently, what I did was I shaved my head every bit because I had the long, nice brown hair, the Jack Briscoe hairstyle, the flowing brown hair. It would shake when the heels would beat me and stuff like that. So I shaved my head and put a mask on. And so evidently that was Eddie, and I'm not sure who totally that, but Eddie put me over because they came up with that Asiatic spike. I taped the thumb and stuck in the guy's, the opening you have in your clavicle there, and held that down. It was like a secret sleeper, new type of sleeper, before MMA, pre-MMA sleeper.
It's like the Dr. Spock thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that's what. And I came in a 6-man tag that very first night in Tampa with the mask on, and it was pretty evident. I had the scar on my shoulders and arms and stuff. It wasn't a big, I wasn't fooling a lot of people who I was. But Eddie put me over with that spike. Is I'm going to, and the main man's going to, Eddie's going to the tag. So I beat Eddie in that tag that first Tuesday night, and I went in, did a couple TVs with the mask on, the Magnificent M. And everything. It was a really beautiful angle, real nice angle. So after about 2 or 3 weeks of TV and going around smashing everybody, wearing the mask, I came back. Steve Kern came out, and very unprofessionally, it was unheard of in the business at that time. And he exposed me. He said, Gordon Soley asked, what do you think about this Magnificent M guy? I said, Magnificent M? You mean Don Muraco? I don't know what, he's acting all weird. He's being really, he's being really strange. I don't know what's going on with him. Yeah, it's Don Muraco. It's not, it was completely unprofessional. It's like saying, Joe Hamilton's the assassin, Don Jardine, or Bill Eady's the mess, or Johnny Walker, busting or Neil Moskowitz. But I wasn't an established, or Dick Byers, one of those. I wasn't an established masked man. But it was just completely unprofessional in wrestling annals, layman's, as far as wrestling TV, wrestling shows goes. So I heard that, and he did that, and I was the next match I was the next match on TV for the TV hour, and I was just irate. I was out of my mind. I was incensed and everything else, and I ended up I beat the hell out of somebody, and I called, said, "Kurt, get your ass out here." And he and I started to get into got into a brawl, and they sent the guys out to pull us apart. The people were screaming and yelling, and we're going, oh, speaking and yelling again. So as they're going, 3 or 4 guys got him, 3 or 4 guys got me. He has a hold of me by the mask, and my mask isn't tight. And as they pull us apart, he keeps the mask off. The mask comes, and I'll come my head, and I'm totally bald, completely. I did not a hair, and it's never been said before. And then I went into big long tirade about Florida and Jack Briscoe, and I didn't want to be Jack Briscoe, and I was better. I did the figure 4 and blah 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 and everything else, and it set me right into that turnstile there, that pinwheel there, So that was a really nice angle, really. And Eddie Graham and Buddy Rogers. That whole expose was totally unprofessional. Not seen before on TV. You didn't go out and the doctor. Dick Byers is the mass destroyer. The destroyer, or Dr. X. You never, huh? What are you doing? You don't. I'm sure people know or things like that, but I was an established masked man anyway. But it was just an unprofessional move as far as the TV show was concerned. No, it was all prearranged. It was all set up how he was going to be, always going to be unprofessional as such.
I've got you.
But there was kind of just what I don't understand. Yeah, and everybody goes, well, yeah, it is Don. Yeah, we know it's Don Muraco, but this is wrestling. Professional wrestling. You're not supposed to say anything. Until you have the hair versus mask match or something like that. Where you unmask him in the ring and stuff. But this is boom, and then we went right into everything.
Right, this happened to my brother. He always had straight hair, and then he just shaved his head, and then it grew back curly. Was that the same for you?
No.
Oh.
Still growing. I just cut it 2 weeks ago. Still coming back well.
And also, you sort of look like, with the sort of like grainy, because I actually watched this before we talked today, and you almost look like Archie the Stomper Gouldy when the mask comes off. It doesn't look like you at all. So was anybody confused as actually who it was before you said it's Don Muraco, obviously?
Boy, I don't know. Well, I had hair. I just the night before TV, I shaved my head. I was walking around with regular Don Muraco, and then that day, actually, it was the day of TV. I shaved. I was with somebody else. I'll be somebody different tomorrow. I'll be a complete different person. And so what? Man, and then he came back. So, oh God, I didn't realize you're going to be a bald-headed guy.
Did anyone do a double take in the locker room?
Oh yeah, sure.
Did somebody not recognize you?
It's just the thing about bald head is just keeping it bald. Just keeping. They did a lot of maintenance there.
So obviously you go into a feud with Steve Keirn afterwards, and working with Steve Keirn. And are there any stories about Keirn that doesn't involve Freddie Blassie?
Yeah. No, he was a good solid worker. We went around the territory and had, he was putting me over. He was getting me, building me up for Jack and Dusty. Slaughtering the pig, as it were. He was slop for the hog, as getting me ready for down the road. So I went around, had good matches with him. Tremendous performer, hard worker, fast, quick. Does everything.
You also worked with somebody else quite famously, I think 1980, and you made a star out of Barry Windham. Before we get onto Barry, how does he compare to Blackjack Mulligan, his dad, and any stories about Blackjack?
Well, now he's a big hunking, huge guy like Jack. But when I started with him, he was 220 pounds. Same size, same height, 6'6", big guy, big kid. Tough kid. Certainly not a shrinking violet. He was a tough son of a gun. But he listened and he wanted to learn. and that was, we had, I go out and have 20-minute matches, then 30-minute matches. Well, at first I beat them, then we'd go, then we'd go broadways, and I couldn't, I get mad as hell, and I do something, I was always doing something to screw them over, hurting them somehow. And that's when we went to the thing where the Tampa TV, where he came from behind with the chair and broke the chair over my head, which is the hardest thing in the world to prepare yourself for. If you know it's coming, if you know you're going to get hit over the back of the head, or you're going to get hit over the head, but you can't see it, and you don't know, you can't even blink. You don't even have a chance to blink because you don't know it's there. Because Dusty had been watching the John Travolta cowboy movie where he was Urban Cowboy, where the girlfriend's the guy got out of jail and took the girlfriend and stuff, and where John Travolta just came back out of nowhere and blindsided the guy. And the Dusty, he loved that scene. So that was it. Then we're doing Urban Cowboy at Tampa Sportatorium. So I'm there, and something happened. I beat somebody. I don't know if I was with Humperdinck or Sonny King at the time, but I just beat somebody up in the ring. 3-4 minute job in the Sportatorium. So I'm at the desk, and I'm facing the desk with Gordon. So on my back's so Barry came in through the back of the building, and they fixed the chair all up too. So it was, then he missed. But it glued the chair back together. So when it hit my head, it would just shatter. Unfortunately, it hit the bar going apart. Slipped me over. But that was one of the hardest things I ever did in the ring or rest, is waiting to get hit over the back of the head, and not even being able to blink or do anything, just not knowing it's coming from anywhere. That's amazing. What a feeling. That was it, and we kind of wrestling. The chair split me this way, and then a week later I was in West Palm Beach, and somebody hit me with a beer bottle, and it went this way. So I had a big cross. I had a big cross going across the top of my head. I think every time somebody saw me, they did the sign of the cross and genuflect or something.
So it had almost like a Charles Manson thing going on.
Yeah.
There's another famous bit with you and Barry Windham where you pile drive him onto the concrete floor. I imagine this is the answer, and you confirm for me or not. You couldn't possibly hurt someone with a pile driver because your legs were so huge, and their head wouldn't be long enough unless it was Jim Nelson's head.
Oh, I don't know, but anybody your pile driver, it doesn't matter how big your legs are, just make sure you keep their head in place and land on your ass. You got to support them and run. You don't be driving them through the mat or driving them through the concrete while you're pile driving. I mean, pretty much like the other that tombstone pile driver I used to use. You got to, you hold them up and pull them out when you hit ground. So you're hitting down and pulling up with protecting your opponent's head. That's the number one rule. That was when I broke in. That was the first commandment of wrestling: is protect your opponent, protect your guy in the ring. Wasn't an opponent, protect the guy you're working with.
With either pile driver, either the regular or the tombstone style, did it jar your back trying to landing basically as a spike downwards on the floor, or was that one of the more painful moves to give?
No, I didn't think of it at the time. You're hot and you're young and you're going. So so many parts involved when you're doing a move like. I never did that type of pile driver a lot anyway. So it's not a case of that was pretty much just for a false finish or a backdrop out of it or something. When I was a heel, maybe I'd throw it in, but that wasn't part of my routine, pile driver.
We'll carry on with Barry Windham then, and this is sort of an odd segue that links Barry Windham and Eddie Graham, because he was NWA president at the time, between 76 and 78. So Barry Windham finally wins the World Championship in WCW in 1993, probably 7 years past maybe when he should have done, when he was, going hot and heavy with Ric Flair, and that was his real prime. I spoke to Ricky Morton last week, and he said that the NWA committee was really against putting the belt on young prospects. Like, he gave the example of Ricky Gibson, Robert's brother, and said he was an amazing talent, and Harley Race wanted to give him the title he thought he deserved to run. And then there's obviously Tommy Rich for like a week. NWA president and the committee, how involved how stuck in the past were they? And going back to old hands like Harley Race, for instance.
Well, it moved in waves. Whoever had the controlling interest at the time, and before Jim Barnett moved into Atlanta, and made that NWA world title as a focal. I think he started pretty much booking the NWA champion, and they put $25,000 down on the belt. So usually it was a territory like Florida was behind Jack, Amarillo was naturally behind Dory and Terry, Kansas City was behind Harley. So usually had a promotion behind you. Then when Tommy Rich, that was the Atlanta TV, that was hot and on fire right then, and Tommy Rich was optimal for putting the belt on. As having a world title or having been a world champion, it was a hell of an idea.
Back to Florida, and did Eddie Graham have any hallmarks as NWA president for those 2 years, 76, 78, that you knew? Oh well, he's obviously the president because the heavyweight champion always seems to be in Florida, for example.
That I don't know. That would go. That was in there all their little with the Fullers and Graham and Jim Barnett and Crockett's and all the people, McGurk and Bill Watts and up to Charlotte, the Crockett's and everybody that had a say in that, and whoever and naturally Fritz in Texas. But he had his and his boys, so that was, and of course Mike LaBelle and Portland. We're Los Angeles and Portland kind of just went with the flow. It wasn't. You never think about Ronnie Main or one of those guys coming up with the NWA title anytime. Assume that the champion would just go through and be a nice draw. Champion was kind of in ways. Well, on a higher echelon, but like the midgets and like the ladies, it would come around to a week or obviously way more prestigious, and he'd work with your top, the top guy in your territory, either your top baby face or your top heel, which depend with that being which way the style with Dory Funk Jr. or Jack Briscoe or Harley Race, whoever that was, I've been the style that they would work. Harley normally heel, so they usually bring him in to feed him a baby face, and Dory and Jack could kind of go anyway, or Jack preferably was a baby face, easier baby face, so they bring him back and then put him against one of your solid heels, and then of course Dory, who could work with anybody, would come in with your top baby face and go an hour and have the people standing up at the end,
I know they used to have the annual promoters or members conventions. I think it was at Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Did you? I know very few wrestlers were invited ever, but did you ever even get an invite, let alone go one year?
No, I didn't know that. It was just that was a cocktail party. Those are just getting away. I don't know if they're taking their wife or getting away from their wife or taking their girlfriend or what they're doing. Just going to Vegas or going to whatever, having a few meals, and then you rent a room and you have money and you call a meeting, and that gives you the opportunity to write the whole trip off as a business expense. Ta-da.
So it was basically one giant piss up, everyone drinking,
Yeah,
and then,
just
and then occasionally they plot to kill Vince McMahon.
Yeah. Well, Vince Senior Vince. There was back then was Vince Senior, and everybody was envious of him, but they liked him. Wasn't it about a year or two into Junior's run that I think the death plot started forming?
Oh, dearie me. They never even attempted to follow through. Why bother? I mean, I love the Jim Ross story where he's privy. He went with Bill Watts, and he was in the stall having a crap, and two people, whoever they were, came in and started plotting to kill Vince McMahon. And the story goes, my sphincter has never been so puckered and tight in my entire life. He lifted his legs up and just tried to make no noise.
I never heard that story.
Well, you must know something about our next subject then. So I've sort of gone to 1980 and then I'm going back to 1979 because I just listed these questions in the wrong order. You came back in full-time 1979. Somebody else made their return in 1979 to Florida as well, and that's Bobo Brazil. Memories of Bobo. And also, where was he at this time physically? Because I think he was already in his 50s by the 79, I think.
79, was that after the... Was that a long run?
I think so. That was the Magnificent M run.
Okay, all right, yeah. Well, Bobo, that was another, NWA commission meeting he was on. The guys used to, they book himself in Hawaii on the way back. Ed Francis had the greatest talent in the world. And he planned those HIC, NBC shows around guys at the end of Japan tours. Guys wanting to get booked and spend a couple weeks in Hawaii. And you just write it off. So Bobo was just on a holiday with his family, but I was a big fan of Bobo growing up. I was big, so they booked me with him, and boy, it was he just touched me, and I was going, oh, I just fly, whatever you want. But don't worry, Bobo. He was just a gentleman. I was a big, him, Carpentier, a couple guys growing up, Well, I never got a chance to work with Ed.
When was the first time you first saw Bobo, and was it Florida where you first wrestled him?
Probably Florida, maybe Texas. Maybe he'd gone through. Maybe he'd been to Houston for Paul Bosch or something. He'd been around. Bobo was getting pretty old by then, So he was pretty much just around Detroit. Then he would tour, but Bobo was the kind of guy. He was like the Black World Champion. You could take him in, and he was known with Andre the Giant, the girls. You could bring him in for a couple weeks, and he would, you book him against your top heel. You could even your top heel could put him over. It wouldn't be one step back at all. With this Bobo Brazil, wouldn't matter. You could catch something clean on you, or get a DQ or something else. But it was Bobo. He was he was an icon.
Did you ever see the legendary bloodbath matches between him and the Sheik in Detroit?
No.
Okay.
But he was the Sheik's boy for a long time.
So Bobo got into wrestling just post-war, I think 1948, way before the civil rights movement was even kicking off, let alone sort of won the battle and everything. There's someone who was in the business from 1970 onwards, and some old-fashioned views going around in locker rooms, I'm sure. How difficult was it for Bobo and other black wrestlers or ethnic wrestlers to get along in the locker rooms, and who were some of the trailblazers that made it possible?
I don't remember any animosity, particular against black wrestlers, people. You got your guys that you're based that are bigots, prejudiced, big bigots. So there's a till today there's the same element. I don't think it's it may have diminished, but it's still still prevalent. Guys that for some reason don't like you for the color of your skin or the way you talk, your religion or whatever it is. So it was. But as far as trailblazers, they're all respectful guys, intelligent, hardworking guys, and drew good money. Always drew good money.
Who were like the first black superstars you remember as a kid watching wrestling growing up?
Bobo and Bearcat. Bearcat, right? I'd still say till today, Bearcat still had the best comeback anybody in the business, today included. He was like 6'6", and he would throw his legs up and he would run around. And he looked like that Tex McKenzie. You ever seen Tex McKenzie?
The really tall
when he ran
fella.
around like that, but he looked completely different. But he'd do that, and he'd run it, and people would the headbutt, and his timing, and it was what a comeback he had. Still today, I still say he had the best comeback in the business ever.
Did you ever get the pleasure of bumping around for him, or did he never wrestle him?
Oh yeah. Well, I was a babyface. I was a babyface then, so I know. I didn't. I was his partner. I had the pleasure of selling for these guys, give them the hot tag. I was smart enough back in those days to know my place, and go and get my couple arm drags or a couple of moves in to show them I could wrestle a little bit, and boom, hamburger.
Yeah.
Hamburger, and then whoever I had to give the hot tag to, who we were going home to. If it was Bearcat, it would be Bearcat in that situation. But yeah, he was. What a comeback.
Speaking of hot tags, there's one of the main tag teams in Florida in the early 70s, I believe, was Mike Graham and Kevin Sullivan. First things first, Mike Graham. Sons of promoters, where does Mike Graham rank in between, let's say, on the scale of George Goulas to Bret Hart?
Well, I never knew George Goulas. Never anything decent about anything from Tennessee. Really, so I can't say anything bad about him. I never met the man. Most of the guys, most everybody he was a good guy. Mike Graham was a good guy. He was a big bench presser, strong, amateur wrestler. He liked I think he was a rich spoiled rich kid. His dad, he had racing boats, motor boats on Tampa Bay. There, he used to ride. They used to do those cigarettes and those giant speedboats and stuff. So he had a mechanic, but he was in the ring. He was easy to work with, nice kid, and a good guy. Out at night, no problem. He was funny guy. I imagine being the promoter's son, great, hell of a worker. They considered him for a while as a, as NW, but he was too short. They didn't like his height. They didn't think his height would be conducive going to other territories, wrestling, against other guys. But
I mean, is that pretty much it? He was just too short, done. You're at a certain level, and that's that.
Yeah, he was, good at everything. And unless you wanted to be like a Putski or Mighty Igor and stuff, bulk up to about 350, 5'6", and something like that. But he was, he was a good guy. He's a good worker, and possible on the mic, as any baby face, normally is. I love the people, thank the fans. I'm going to get back and try my hardest.
And his tag team partner, of course, Kevin Sullivan. This was before Army of Darkness and Mark Lewin came in as the Purple Haze and everything. I mean, what do you remember as Kevin Sullivan as a all-American babyface almost?
He wasn't staying around. He was getting ready to leave. I don't know where, he'd come from New York. He was up from around Boston, so I guess he'd started up there, and knowing he was a local guy. And being back in the Vince Senior era, he was and a shorter fellow himself. He was known, but he was a local guy from that area there, the upstate New York area, Boston being Boston. he wasn't going to get any. They weren't going to do him any favors as far as becoming something. And WWF in those days was a big man territory. You'd build up a 300-pounder to come in, work with Bruno, and later Pedro, and later Bob, and then that would that was pretty much the run. But
there's two rumors about Kevin Sullivan in the early days. One, he was genuinely into the occult, and two, he frequented nudist colonies. Either of those true?
I have no idea.
I'll leave that there. Then.
No, he and Mark Lewin were good friends. So I don't think, he used to come to Hawaii. Then he worked for Leah Maivia at times when Mark was in the thing. He did some, vacation write-offs and stuff. They're doing some business as well. But he, I don't remember, actually really into the occult, and possibly, I was never that close with him.
No, I don't know if it was a healthy interest or not, but I'll tell you what, instead of those two tag team partners, someone you tagged up with in, I think it was in 1980 or around that time, it was in your later run, Joe LeDuc. Everybody has a good Joe LeDuc story.
Oh, God. He was a madman. We traveled around. We had a great crew. There's King Curtis, Joe, Mr. Saito, Masa Saito, Killer Khan, Masao Hattori, the manager, the referee. He was an amateur wrestler too, from Japan. And Joe had a big van. He called it the Starship. And he'd just drive with his big screwdriver in his hand. And yeah, Joe was a good guy. We used to have Sunday blowouts. I gave you the last hour. I gave you the lineup of the Florida towns. The Florida, it changed after later in this run. That 77 to 79, that era back there, where they had. Monday was still West Palm. Tuesday was still Tampa. Wednesday, TV in Miami. Thursday became a spot show. I don't, just a high school or VFW or something. Friday was either Tallahassee or Fort Lauderdale. Saturday wasn't a double yet. Saturday was still Sarasota, St. Petersburg, whatever. But Sunday they changed. They ran. Eddie Graham bought that rodeo thing in Orlando, rodeo rink, and they converted that to the Eddie Graham Memorial Sportatorium up in Orlando. So we had that Sunday night, and we had Jacksonville Sunday afternoon. And so we would, as the heels would all, everybody was like potluck. Everybody called it potluck here in Hawaii. Everybody bring a dish or a plate. Something. And I remember Joe LeDuc, he really got into it. One time he brought his whole crock pot, and he's making Canadian roast. And he had a pot roast with gravy and everything else going. Briscoes were big. We'd go to Butler Aviation and, set up our stuff for when we finished the matches in Jacksonville. We had coolers and rum and it was like a Club Med of everything, just everything there. We're just going. So we'd have everybody have a big plate of food and whatever the wife made, or steaks and barbecue and Korean beef and all. So the Briscoes are always smart. They'd come to the window, and we'd pass them plates of food out the window with their lunch. They knew where the best lunch in town was, and we had it back at Butler Aviation. And we're all packing. Everybody was packing heavy, and everything. We filled the watermelon full of rum. The last flight back, the 90-minute flight back from Orlando. Yeah, those are good days. Florida was good days. You'd wrestle somebody. You'd wrestle different opponent every night. That's when you still knew how to work. You still knew how to work back in those days because you were again. you're changing every night. You know, every night you're going through something. You know, somebody different. You're not necessarily completely different, but you know, different styles, different. You know, it wasn't me and Pedro every night, or me and Steamboat every night, all over. You know, jumping all over the country. You know, up and down the coast, San Francisco, San Diego to L.A., to Bakersfield, to San Francisco, to Portland, to Seattle. You know, all up and down every night. You know, you lose all any creativity, whatever you know, insights you may have. We're back in those days wrestling. Some, you know, Jack Briscoe one night, Mike Graham next night, somebody else, you know, Steve Kern the next night. You were able to Manny Fernandez another night, Bobo Brazil. And you're able to keep fresh, keep different, you know. So it was different eras, you know.
Two questions there. I know it was a different era, way before pre 9/11. Were you allowed to take the rum watermelon on the plane with you?
We were traveling in Twin Beaches, private charters.
Oh right, so yes.
No, we weren't. No, we weren't. This isn't Delta Airlines or U.S. Air. No, we had our own. We had our own Twin Beaches. We'd fly out of Tampa, but Butler Aviation was the pretty much around the United States. That's where all the rock stars and movie stars and rich people travel now. Is out of, you know, the private planes and the private jets, and that's what we had in those days. Just twin engines. But.
And one more thing, you said Joe LeDuc was a wild man. Wildest Joe LeDuc story. I've got a feeling you thought of one, and then you sort of backtracked and didn't say it.
Well, there's a lot of stuff I backtracked. And one night coming out of Fort Myers, we're in either Hattori's van. It must have been Hattori's because Joe wasn't driving. We were in Hattori's van, so it was like a rainy night, and you know we're doing fabulous business. We're doing over $2,000 a week in Florida with that. Like Curtis was wrestling Dusty in Miami. Bad Leroy Brown or somebody else had him up in Tampa. I had him in Jacksonville. You know, they're different. And Jack in Miami, and you know, it's mixed up like that. So, coming out of Fort Myers, anyway, long story. Coming out of Fort Myers, we all filed into Hattori's van, and Joe was at the back position, the last one to get in on the door. So, you know, they're coming and people were, giving us the business as we're going along. So we're going, one guy standing with his girlfriend, he pulls his shirt up, and he's got a big knife sticking out there. And Joe slid the door open, and he was left-handed too, like Harley. And boom, he cracked the guy right in the lips. And the guy folded like that, spun around, and fell face first into a puddle of water. And almost drowned. So we got back, we're driving in the car, picked up our beer. So we're headed up, we're up by Punta Gorda, which is 35-40 miles north of Fort Myers. So the van turned awful quiet, after it had gone real quiet after that. And so we got there. So finally we're going through Punta Gorda, and us, King Curtis goes, "Whew, oh, well, he's alive. Otherwise, there would have been a roadblock up here to stop us." Oh, God. But I guess that was the start of Joe's, the hard times that Joe fell upon, that he got hit with that lawsuit. The guy sued him. Yeah. He got hit with that lawsuit of that. Oh, I just crushed the guy. He just, boom, put him to sleep. One shot. 300-something pounds coming down out of a van. Good thing he didn't fall on his knife. He would have killed himself.
I will move on from Joe LeDuc then. I'm probably going to move on from Bob Backlund as well. We covered Bob Backlund in an earlier episode you can have a look at. What made you... I'll backtrack slightly. Last Tangle in Tampa you take on Bob Backlund for the WWF title. You can check the Bob Backlund episode for more on that. But You said that basically you were scouted by the WWF, and then you went to the WWF straight afterwards. I looked it up, and there's quite a gap between you leaving Florida in 1980 and you resurfacing. There's basically 4 months of nothing.
No, I was probably in, most likely I came back here to Hawaii. I was working with Leah Maivia. Or Peter Maivia was a promoter. I think Peter was going into, was just coming up with the cancer. It was just starting. And I had Peter's last match in Samoa.
Really?
And no, I was going to Japan. That was in between. I was going to Japan, but Peter was still booking. But I was back here, working for Peter. Probably that 4 month break, because I'd always come back to Hawaii and stay here. And I don't know how large their the matches and results and stuff went out. So that's probably why I wasn't heard from. Maybe a Japan tour in the midst of that as well. I don't know.
You made one more appearance in 1981 for about a month in Florida, and one of the people you wrestled was Jerry Lawler. I just wanted to sort of make a mention of that, which is just one of those weird dream matches that I don't think anybody would have ever realised, or most people don't realise that actually happened.
I wrestled Lawler a lot when I was around Atlanta.
Oh, really?
They were talking about Robert Gibson. I used to Ricky Gibson, not Robert. Robert's Ricky Gibson. Him and I were tight. We were buddies. We used to hang. He's one of those guys like Terry Gordy or Billy Howard or some of those other guys. Started working as like 15, 16 years old. The Carnies and stuff. Hell of a worker, could do anything. He was a good guy. He got sick later. But yeah, that was when I was hanging on with that last Florida trip was the guy that hit by a car and got killed in Tampa. Eric the Red. Eric the Red. That's who it was. I never met the man, but he'd been in Tampa, and he was going great guns over there. And I was working for Peter and Leah, not doing anything, and he'd gotten hit by a car and killed. And they were stuck and I left, and they were stuck without a heel. So they called me to come in and to finish up a couple months or a month or so before I started in New York, up in Florida there. I immediately grabbed the Florida Championship title for some reason. I don't know why, because they wanted Grand Apollo was a kid they were pushing at the time there, I think. And they wanted, so I got that, and I came in. It was just a 4 or 5 week stint in Florida that I came in. And if I wrestled with Lawler there, it'd probably good. But I know I wrestled Lawler quite a few times in Atlanta, out of the Atlanta territory. I liked working with Jerry. He was easy. He's easy work, good worker. He's a little small, but he's in Tennessee and he has his own territory because he could be as big as he wanted to be. But he was a good worker. I enjoy. I never got involved in the business end with him or anything. In fact, they lived. I think it was his first wife. We lived in the same. Angela Mosca used to call it Kayfabe Arms. There was a small apartment building near the airport in was it Hapesville, Georgia, one of those little satellite towns, right, basically Atlanta, and it was right by and we all lived. He and his wife, I guess he had a home in Tennessee, but he brought his family, and his family was young. The kid that wrestled, I think, he had a son that wrestled for a while.
Yeah, Brian Christopher.
The kid was
Brian Christopher.
Yeah, that's right. So they were there, and his wife, and he brought him all. He was living there in the same. He was a good worker, good guy. I luckily I had never had to do business with him in Tennessee or WWE or anything like that. So, all I know is the good part.
Well, you like to surf and you like to get paid, so I imagine Memphis wasn't the place for you.
Yeah. Well, all the stories in those times about Tennessee and stuff, they're all horror stories. You know, that one territory, that one area, I think the Fullers were running was a small area, never had a over 100-mile trip, Alabama, Tennessee, some area there. It was split in there. I guess the guys were doing like 800 to sometimes 1,000 a week, and you know, home every night, you know, close. So that was a good trip there. But I never. That was just a quick thing.
I will ask you the big question about Florida, and then we'll get on to the firing line edition 2, where I'll throw some names at you. But the big question really is, what went wrong with Florida so quickly? Because when you left in 81, I think it was still in good shape.
WWF went wrong with everybody. Their TVs were. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have my hand on it. You know, the Jack. You know, the Briscoes with the TV, the Atlanta TV, and so they lost Jack and Jerry there, and then I don't know because they had great talent. Blair and Dusty and Ron Bass. You know, they had a good number of heels. All the young guys. A lot of young Scott McGee and those type of guys going, you know, working. So I don't know what happened. I would think just, you know, Vince, big TV,
and,
Hulk Hogan,
and probably Jim Crockett Promotions, because I think Dusty went maybe 85 or 84, and I think other people must have left at the same time as well. So just dearth of talent, maybe.
Yeah, just lost. You know, they weren't. I guess just, you know, Charlotte the Crockett's were going great guns at the time, and Gagne AWA was still had their head above water, and then there was other places, you know, the other territories that were still the same old wrestling formula, where guys, you know, like when I got in the business, you know, we're working night to night, you know, just making a living, and weren't planning on becoming movie stars or anything.
Like Dusty Rhodes, of course. What was the film? Not Midnight Cowboy. Which was
Urban Cowboy.
Urban Cowboy. There you go.
John Travolta. Yeah, got me a good whack over the head.
I was thinking either Midnight Cowboy, but I think that might be.
That was John Voight and Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah, Dustin
wasn't
Hoffman. Yeah, I was saying
that was earlier.
That'd be a very unpopular gimmick, especially I'm sure in the 70s.
Especially down south.
Yeah. Right, so I'll give you the final names for our little firing line. Same rules as last time. If you know them, you know them. Give us a story if you've got one. First name is Bob Orton Sr.
Didn't know him.
Ah.
I met him a couple times. One funny story, we're in Kansas City in a big auditorium there, the big, wherever the big place is, seat 15 plus thousand people, you know, Hulk Hogan and everything else. So me and Bob, I think it was when Bob and I, it was after the Piper thing, so Bob and I were tag partners, at least traveling a lot together, healing a lot. And Bob was a cigarette smoker. And, you know, I know how he kept his matches and cigarettes and stuff. I was eating with him all the, you know, on the road, out to dinner and stuff all the time. He'd be one of the guys that eat and then stop and have a cigarette in the middle of his meal. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, so we go in, so Bob Orton Sr.'s there. So, you know, everybody's shaking hands. I look on the ground, there's Bob's cigarettes, a package of cigarettes with the matches, the way he fixed them up and how he stuck them in the package and stuff. I said, "Hey, Bob, here, your cigarettes. You dropped them." No, they're not mine. I said, "Yeah, these are yours." No, somebody else's. Why am I saying? Hey, he's a smoking fool. I said, "What do you mean they're not yours?" No, they're not mine. They're not mine. But that's my Bob Orton Sr. story.
Couldn't you have heard his voice? You must know he smoked about 180 a day. He had like the deepest voice.
He didn't want the old man to bust him though.
I'll give you the next one. Jimmy Jam Garvin.
Jimmy Garvin. He was a good guy. He was with Ronnie when I met him. Ian Precious and his wife Ronnie Garvin. Ronnie Garvin had a pilot license, and I think he had a wealthy wife. I'm not sure, but I don't know if he had a small single engine or they rented the single engine. But they do a lot of the towns. They'd fly a lot of the towns. Ronnie and Jimmy. Yeah, they had Terry with them. Terry was there too. So I wrestled. God, I was a pretty little thing, cute little baby face, and about 220 pounds, 225 pounds, along the curly hair and everything else. So they booked a show in a penitentiary, in a prison. So I go out in a jacket and I'm a rugged little baby faced wrestler. I go in. And then all the prisoners in there, yeah, whatever. They could care less. And I'm wrestling. I booked with Terry Garvin, and out he comes flowing, and he's dancing, and he's just gaining up to the hill. He got more cheers than the biggest baby face we had on the card. All the prison, all the inmates, everything are going out of their mind. So I'm working with Terry. Everything I did, boo. And he'd beat the hell out of me. They'd start cheering and roaring. But yeah, Jimmy was with them. Good guy. I wasn't with him a lot. I used to go up to Atlanta once in a while. They'd ship me up from Tampa to Barnett liked me.
Oh, and my boy, I've got those photos.
My boy, yeah. So I do Atlanta for him, and I'd work at times with spend a week up there. So Jimmy Garvin. Great worker. All those guys. I don't know if he was from Montreal or broke in Montreal or something, but all the, he and Ronnie. Of course, I heard Ronnie. I read later that guys didn't like Ronnie Garvin's work. I thought he was,
just because you mentioned Terry, and we all know what Terry Garvin's most famous for. Were there any rumors when you were in the WWF about the old ring boy thing?
Well, I don't know if the rumor. Everybody was sure. I don't know. No rumor. Well, Mel Phillips was. He pretty much. He dominated the scene with the ring boys and stuff, and nobody knew or really saw anything except the guys that set the ring and got early to the buildings and stuff. But no, he, as far as I know, in fact, I just spoke to Jimmy Powers last week on the phone. And he's having big problems with one of his shoulders, like the fifth surgery on the same shoulder. So he's not happy. But yeah, Terry Garvin. No, nobody knew. He was just in the office, and everybody knew. He and Pat were close, and he was part of that clique. So,
if Jimmy Powers had problems with his toes, I bet Mel Phillips would be around there pretty sharpish, wouldn't he?
Oh, God.
I'll give you a few more, and then we'll shut this podcast down, as I always seem to say. Ronnie Bass.
Didn't know him too well. He was usually, I was coming as he was going, or he was going as I was coming, I was leaving. Met him, I knew him, spoke with him.
I'll skip through El Gran Apollo, because you mentioned him a bit earlier, but I will mention, because you've also mentioned him earlier, Bad Leroy Brown.
That guy he was like John Mylolo from down the docks. He could sleep anywhere at any time, anyhow. He'd get in the car and his head would go back and he'd be out. He was, if he was on a trip and he'd miss the meat spot, he'd race to catch you up so he didn't want to drive. That guy wanted to sleep. Good worker. He was Ron Daniels. He played football for the Dallas Cowboys for a while. A big guy, athletic, good fun. He's cool.
Bobby Duncan.
He was one of Gary Hart's boys in Tampa, and he was kind of finishing up there. Athletic guy, was a football player. I think he played for the St. Louis Cardinals. Was out of the West Texas State, hell of a worker, but kind of a bigger bigger, more athletic type guy than a Funk style, but could still, still go like hell. He was getting ready. They were going up to who was Bruno the champion? Yeah, Bruno was. I think Bruno was. So he was getting. That was that Philadelphia. He had a big show. We went for a battle royal, and he was up there for. Somebody was putting him over, getting him ready right for Bruno. He was up there when Lou bladed everybody in the ring, and blades on every hand, and his razor blade. The first time I ever did a blade job. Then they're opening the Spectrum there, and somehow Lou got in the battle royal for some reason. Stood in the middle of the ring, and everybody was like there was fire. Everybody backed up.
I take it was an involuntary.
But earlier I didn't know. I came back, I guts all over me.
I take it was an involuntary blade job. He didn't say, "Listen, I've got an idea."
No. He would go. If they wanted, he'd cut the hell out of it. He'd come back and he'd stick his tongue through his cheek. Look what I did. He'd stick his tongue out the side of his mouth. He'd do it straight A's. Straight A's or a pocket pull.
Jesus.
He just go. I don't know why they got maybe from Reno and Curtis or how they got that way. Abdullah and him, they just love to scar their forehead up.
Yeah, you get addicted to the blood loss, I suppose. I'll give you a few more, and then we will shut down. Bryant St. John,
artist. He was good. He was in the House of Humperdinck. Hump was a great guy. That second time there, he was our manager. He ended up. He was managing. He managed the Blondes. That was the second coming. I had Buddy Roberts and Jerry Brown earlier. He traveled with them. Then Stan Lane and Brian St. John, and he had those guys as under his, as he was managing them. And I know he loved his art. He was always into his art. I heard he's doing now. He's on Facebook or something. And he's selling artwork and stuff. Nice guy, good worker.
I will have to ask this just because you brought his name up. Sir Oliver Humperdinck. Did he have like some sort of inner turmoil because he was trying to hide the fact he was gay?
I don't know. I didn't know. I'm not sure that he was gay. I know he liked women. I know.
Oh, really?
Or Or he never mentioned it. He never. When it was off around us, he was very well could have been, He ended up good friends with Terry and those guys, but maybe I don't know, just because he didn't fit. The New York clique was hard to get into. Everybody was all over the place, with families and traveling. It was a conducive area for making friends when you're in the WWF. You don't know who you're with or where you're going or what you're doing.
I should reveal my source. I did an interview with Ricky Morton about a week or so ago, and he said he was gay. So I didn't know if it was like a secret in the business or.
Bam Bam asked me that one time, and I said I didn't know, and I didn't. I knew around Tampa and stuff. He liked the young lady. He spoke of the young ladies and liked them. I never knew of him to be have a boyfriend or. Something. I mean, it could be. If it was, he was a good one. He was a good guy. Still, didn't. And he turned into he was like Dusty. He turned into Booker when that period that you're talking about that Florida was starting to decline as a championship wrestling from Florida. And when he was Dusty's right hand man for a long time. He was a big Dusty Rhodes fan. We'd go up. We lived in the north end of Tampa. There was the country, but there's a rock and roll bar up there. Dusty used to love and go and sing Johnny Be Good and stuff. They'd let him up and go, and he said, "Oh yeah, there's Humperdinck standing with the lighter." No, I was over at Hump's house a lot. He could have been, but I don't know.
Well, if he was, he's welcome to it.
Yeah.
So, doesn't matter. Who cares? I'll tell you what, I'll skip through a couple more. You've already mentioned Scott McGee. Paul Jones, Mr. Florida.
Very talented wrestler. He was another guy. He was going as I was coming, or he'd been there. He'd been in Florida and left and made a hell of a mark in Florida with Jack Briscoe and Tim Woods and Wrestling 2 and the cast of characters that they had down there. Then he was up in Charlotte. I only spent a few months in Charlotte, and he was kind of finishing up there. He wasn't no longer the big card that he was, but he was around. He had a great hand. Nice guy, great guy. He was away,
Sorry.
No.
Okay. I'll give you two more. Reggie Parks.
Oh yeah, he was a good guy. He's the one. He started making all the belts for everybody. He's the original championship belt maker. He all his life, I think, lived in Nebraska, Omaha. I think Omaha, Nebraska. Out of there, very simple man. Apartment did like a lot of John told us. He had his couple beers that he wanted and cooked his meals and kept to himself. Had a wife and no kids. He liked to go snowmobiling. He'd go snowmobiling up in Colorado and stuff, up in the mountains and stuff. He was quite an outdoorsman. A good guy. Always in great shape.
I was going to ask that as well. He was a big-time bodybuilder, wasn't he, in the 50s?
I suppose, yeah. He never. He was. I was working with this lady here in Hawaii. 15, maybe 20 years ago, when I wasn't really working. I was just trying to keep my foot in the wrestling door, as it were. So he was. He made the belts. She made him. He made him tag team belts and a championship belt. So, and she flew him over here too. And he and his wife came here, and we went out to dinner, had a good time, and he just had some sucker on the line for 3 big belts, and $1,000, about $3,000 worth of belts. Beautiful, he used to do beautiful work, leather work, and stuff. The belts he made were fabulous.
Was he the designer as well as the manufacturer?
That I don't know whether they would have their own, send in their own design or add into what they had, or I don't know what the process was. If he would send them a mock-up or something, or what was going on.
We'll do one last one. Manny Fernandez.
A raging bull. He was a fun guy. He and Barry used to hang out all the time and crash cars and wreck cars and go crazy. It was a good time. Manny's a good. He's in Tampa now, I think, and hell of a worker. He and Barry used to hang out all the time. He used to fight all the time. I remember I left in the TV in town down at North Albany. Left one time. We're doing promos. I went away sometime, and I came back, and there was blood, big trail of blood on the floor. What's this? What the hell's going on here? So Manny and Barry got in another fight, and somebody was, they're friends. One day they were fighting, next day they're friends. You don't know. It was a good time. He got in the business. He really got, he really got to love in the business, and really enjoyed it. Traveled around, made a name for himself.
One of Manny's apparent traits that I hear of is he's one of the bigger bullshitters in the business. May that be true in your experience?
He was just getting started when I knew him.
He's just building up.
Yeah, just he was just learning. Maybe later he had, but at the time, it was he was nice to us. I was a heel. He was a babyface, so I didn't get a chance to, be and listen to many of his stories. I told you about that fight with Nikolai, but that he didn't know. He didn't know they were fighting. It's one case when you're, some guy's 300-pounder turns around. He's been trained boxer, and and he starts throwing left jabs and right hooks, and you don't know what's going on. So it's obvious you're going to get knocked out there. You're not really. You were fooling around with the guy back of the guy's neck. Next second, he's throwing those ham hocks into your face. Nikolai had some fists. Nikolai was a big guy. Had legs like the pillars.
If you were to nominate one person who may be the biggest fabricator of stories in the wrestling business, and there's a lot of names to choose from, who would you pick?
Oh boy. Jaggers is a good one. Jaggers had a lot of stories. Well, there was a bunko, Uncle Elmer. Uncle Elmer was a bunko guy. He'd open his briefcase and have all the watches. And those Albano and Blassie and stuff, they'd buy the gold, the gold banded Rolexes and stuff, and they'd buy, $100. Oh, and then they'd bitch because a week later everything was turned green. You know what you're getting, you're buying a fake Rolex. What the hell? It's the world of professional wrestling. Uncle Elmer was even had cars and stuff. Sit down and talk to him. He got married. He did got married in the Meadowlands. He got over. Somehow he got over. He was a huge guy, big guy. I just talked to him and I said, "Oh, how you doing, Elmer?" He says, "Oh, Miss Daisy. What was her name? I don't know. The lady he married, Miss something."
Oh, I don't know. I don't remember.
I said, just trying to didn't have a lot of conversation flow going with him, So just making up things as you go along. Well, how's Miss Daisy doing? Oh, my God, her hemorrhoids are flaring up. I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to know that. Gonna save that to our second conversation. Happened to be something that was on his mind at the time, I suppose.
Well, on his something, I suppose. On his finger, if he was being friendly.
Yeah, on his face.
Was that a real marriage, by the way?
You got me.
Oh, on
I think
TV.
I was in Scranton that night.
Well,
I wasn't on that show.
Well, it's probably best that you weren't having to stand there pretending.
If they did to him, they had Uncle Elmer and Hillbilly Jim and Hillbilly was already out. They had cousin Luke in there too, and they had him carrying around that little suckling pig. When we did that, the Land of the Thousand Dances, they had him holding the pig, and I guess cousin Luke or something. He was a farm boy anyway, so he was pinching the pig's nuts or something. Pig was pissing all over Uncle Elmer. Luckily, I was on the other side of the line, but you could hear it. Oh, it's hysterical. It is.
They say end on a high. We had hemorrhoids that I thought we couldn't top, and now we've got pig piss on the land of a thousand dances. Yeah,
you're not going to top that. Pig piss in the land of a thousand dances.
There we go. Pig piss closes this episode on Florida Championship Wrestling. Remember that. Thank you so much for listening. I'll do the plugs very quickly. Instagram, YouTube, podcast, DonTheRockMorocco.com for all your signed stuff. Thank you very much, Don, for entertaining us once again. And we will catch you again next week. Cheers.
Hope you feel better.
Yeah, me too. Aloha.